Hey guys, LEGO Master 365 here. We're finally back with the new, proper Mats models. It's been over a year since the last one, and the main reason is that I just really didn't make any models last year. This year, I'm shaking things up and just making whatever I want. And to reflect that, this episode is not on a Thomas model. This video will be showcasing my Long Island Railroad number 39. The reason I wanted to make this model is because I'm a volunteer at the Rare Museum of Long Island, who look after the real 39. I'll explain more at the end of the video why she looks like that. But for now, I'll do a quick history on number 39. Number 39 was built in 1924 by the Pennsylvania Railroad, who owned the LIRR at the time, in their Juniata shops. She is a class G5s locomotive, which had a good tractive effort and were able to stop and start quickly, perfect for commuter passenger trains. 39 was part of the second batch of G5s's for the Long Island Railroad and pulled commuter trains from 1924 to 1955. 39 participated in the Operation Changeover event in the End of Steam celebration, which was how Long Island said goodbye to their steam and fully switched to diesel power. 39 and her sister 35 started at opposite ends of the islands, each pulling one coach carrying Boy Scouts. They met at Hicksville Station, where two Alco RS3 diesel locomotives took their coaches and finished the journey. 39 and 35 then traveled nose-to-nose back to Morris Park. After 39's retirement, she was donated to the Long Island Museum of Art, History, and Carriages, and stayed there until 1980 when she came under the care of the Steam Up 39 group. Eventually, this group became the Railroad Museum of Long Island in 1992 and was moved to the Riverhead location, where she's been ever since. Now with the history lesson out of the way, let's talk about how I made this engine in HO scale. Luckily for me, there were actually a couple of companies who made brass models of the G5 class. Olympia Models, Westside Models, and Bowser all made versions of the G5. Westside and Bowser made LIRR versions as well as PRR, but Olympia only made PRR versions. We'll get to the differences later. Personally, I thought the Olympia version looked the best, so I purchased one off of eBay. It arrived, I tested it, and it ran beautifully. I would later find out this model was probably put together in the 60s, so the fact it runs as good as it does is amazing to me. I then found some Waterslide Transfers to the LIRR carriages, but they were the same font and size as the loco lettering, so I went for it. I got all this stuff back in early June and left it alone for a while. In November, I got the itch to work on it, so I compared the lettering to how it looked on the tender. And that's when I noticed something. My model had a completely different tender from the real engine. Not only that, but the pilot looked different as well. And here's the differences between the PRR G5s and the LIRR G5s. The LIRR had larger gaps between refueling points, meaning that the standard G5 tender would be too small. For the second batch, of which 39 was made, the G5s were given K4 tenders. These are much larger tenders with a greater water capacity. The pilots are different too. On the PRR, the pilots are made with grates, while on the LIRR, they had solid pilots. Also, the LIRR removed the air reservoir under the smoke box. So I would have to remove these parts. The first thing I did was buy a new brass K4. The thing you have to understand about brass engines is that electrically, everything is live because it's all brass. So you can't have the usual one side of the chassis is positive and the other is negative, like modern plastic die-cast models are. To get around this, old brass engines are set up so the loco is positive and the tender is negative. So I would have to find a brass model that worked the same way. This Sunrise model's K4 looks like it might work. Let's go for it. Ah, here it is. Now that looks much better. And yes, it works. That's one problem out of the way. Now let's look at the pilot. The pilot comes away pretty easily. It's just soldered on top of the frames. Removing the body made access much easier. The air reservoir was also just screwed in, but the screw head was under this other threaded piece that I believe held the pilot wheels in place. Also, with how old the solder is, it wouldn't just melt away. So I painfully unscrewed the tank itself, breaking its mounts. I also shaved down the screw thread so it was flat, and I covered it into Mia modeling putty. Speaking of modeling putty, I filled in all the grates in the pilot with the putty. Originally, I was going to remove the grates altogether and bend my own piece of brass to fit, but looking at it made me realize it was a casted piece, so I wasn't going to attempt all that. With all those mods done, it was time for painting. When painting brass, you have to use etching primer, as normal primer doesn't adhere to the metal. I did this at John's house. After the body was primed, we watched Hamilton. Now I know I just said that without etching primer the paint wouldn't adhere to the brass, but when it came to the chassis I had a bit of an issue. I wanted to remove the wheel assembly with the cylinders all as one part, but this one rod's screws were entirely sheared, so I couldn't remove them. So I had to hand paint the chassis with this spider-looking mess of wheels and rods in the way. Being the frames of the loco, I opted to paint these in matte black as this part is never shiny. I also painted in the wheel centers and tires to the same matte black. Going back to the body, I wanted to airbrush it black as airbrushing provides a much more even and light coat. However, the airbrush was clogged and it wouldn't spray correctly, so I had to bite my tongue and spray paint the model. The one nice thing about this is that the black was already glossy. Once the paint dried, I painted the smokebox in Vallejo oily steel. This color ended up being perfect for the smokebox. For the firebox, I opted for the Vallejo gunmetal gray as it was a bit darker. Popping the body onto the chassis really brought the models together. Now it was on to adding those waterslide transfers. Following the reference photos I had, it was pretty easy to add all the lettering. I don't have any microsol or microset, so there's a couple of bubbles under the lettering in places. I'll probably go back and do that someday. I wasn't sure what color the roof of the engine was supposed to be. Some Penzi engines had their roofs painted in Tuscan red, while others matched the rest of the body. I talked to the Rare Museum of Long Island president, Don Fisher, and he told me that the roof of 39 was painted the same color as the rest of the engine. Brunswick Green! Oh. For those of you unaware, or for those of you who live in the UK, Pennsylvania Brunswick Green is an extremely dark, almost black-like green. The official mix is 1 part green and 6 parts black. If you're not familiar with Penzi, you probably couldn't tell Brunswick Green from just plain black. This meant that my model was now in the wrong color despite being pretty much finished. Well, since I have to redo the lettering at some point, I guess she'll get a repaint later. For now though, she still looks good in the black. So why is 39 so important? And why is she currently in pieces? And where is her boiler? Well, 39 and 35 are the only 2 surviving Long Island Railroad steam locomotives. There were a few attempts to get 35 back into steam, but those fell through and she's now being put back together as a static display engine. However, the Rare Museum of Long Island is currently raising funds to bring 39 back to steam with the Strasburg Railroad. If the goal is met, 39 will be restored to working order and haul passenger trains on the Strasburg Railroad for the next 48 years. The museum needs to raise about $1.3 million by 2028 for this to happen. If 39 does return to steam, she would not only be the only LIRR steam engine still operating, she would also be the only Pennsylvania Railroad heritage engine at Strasburg, and she would be one of only 2 Pennsylvania Railroad heritage engines in steam. If you'd like to donate, please click the link below or the card in the corner. Thank you all so much for watching. There's still a lot to be done with this model, but it has been a while since a proper video has been uploaded on this channel. So for now, this is how my 39 model stands. Maybe I'll make a follow-up video in the future where I actually show you the repainting process and reattaching the wire. My life has been very busy recently, so I haven't had a lot of time to work on any models or videos. Honestly, most of the content I had planned was making the guitar case layout, but I still haven't gotten around to getting back to it. But I promise Thomas content will be returning soon. See you in the next one. Bye!
The steamers, strangely out of place, headed back to Jamaica shops through the drizzle that appropriately signaled the funeral of Long Island steam. Happily, both engines survived, hopefully to return to live steam again in the future.